flowing. Let her rip. Everybody, welcome to Marketeers Clubhouse. I'm Jamie Calon. It's been a bit. I've been enjoying the summer. I've got an interesting gentleman with me today, Rob Fraser. Welcome. Did I get it right, Fraser?
You did. Yeah. Okay. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I'm an idiot. I have to ask every guest to make sure I get their last name correct because I want to make sure that I'm not too much of a fool. Welcome. I've got in contact with you. First thing that I ever got from you guys was a pair of socks. And you own a really interesting company called Outway Socks. And it's, to me, this is a really interesting example of branding and product creation at a very small micro level. As far as a product, you're putting things on people's feet. Now, before anybody says anything, I buy these socks. We started buying socks from you for our cycling team under a different brand, and you've rebranded since then. We bought them, and truthfully, it's the only piece of cycling apparel that was custom that did not let us down were your socks. And subsequently, my company does a little bit of work with you guys with fixtures and displays and stuff. But I won't ride my bike without a pair of these. I've got like 10 pair in my bag, in my van. They're everywhere. They are so much better. They never fall down. They don't bunch up in the end of my shoe. When they get wet, they perform. Like, it's actually an amazing product, and it's a sock. And, I've got friends that have worked in custom sock companies before, but to be truthful, the products have always kind of let me down. And in the world of cycling stuff, to take one thing out of your kit that doesn't fuck up and make your day terrible is really, really good. And I don't run, but I can imagine when your kit is only two things, basically a pair of runners and a pair of shoes, it's even more important. So one, congrats on actually making a great product. However you got there. R&D wise is amazing. It's really good. Now, just so I have it right as well, the custom socks comes out of a company called Custom Lab, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So anybody looking to actually look at this product, go to Outway. What's the URL? Outwaysocks.com.
Our main website is just outway.com, outway.com, and then Custom Lab is customlab.com. But yeah, we've got the two, and so Outway is the branded part of our business. You can go on there and you can buy a wide variety of different athletic socks and designs, not customizable, just pre-designed. We've got hundreds of options. And as you mentioned, we have a second business which leverages everything we do on the branded side. So the product development, like you just kind of alluded to it, the quality of the product. And we've created a business that allows people to put their own branding on the socks. So how that differs from, you've also mentioned, previous custom sock companies or all other custom sock companies, is they basically exist as promotional marketing companies. They're not product first. They're kind of just like I said, promotional marketing companies, and they don't necessarily have an entire sock brand and supply chain behind them powering that business. So what makes us unique is, first and foremost, we're a sock business. Outway is the larger business, and that's where a lot of our energy goes into. Custom Lab is powered by Outway. So the product that you get and put your branding on leverages all of that technology and product development, and now over 8 years of making it better with your logo. So it is unique in that way, as our custom sock business is not just strictly there to make money and be a promotional marketing company. It is really the second arm of our entire business, and allows people to customize their product on an exceptional base and work across every kind of sport too. And the custom business is actually quite unique because outside of just custom branding, we'll take the input from the client and customize the actual structure of the sock for whatever their use case is going to be as well. So if you wanted cycling socks, which you got, we will make sure we use our best technology in cycling. If someone comes to us and is doing for basketball or running or football or casual, we can do everything. Where Outway, we sell one specific type of sock, and we call that an all-day performance sock, because we want to create basically the only pair of socks you'll need all day, whether you're going to wear it in business casual to a dinner out to a marathon or a bike ride. We want to create a pair of socks where you didn't have to think about what sock you're going to put on for the day. Um, Inherently, that's going to be less use case specific. So there are cases where you're going to want something a little more cushioned or a different material. And we do offer those as well, like merino socks. But most of our products on Outway are an all day performance pair of socks where you can do everything you want to do in that single pair. And that was generally the problem we were solving with Outway is, how do we create, I say like a yoga pant for the foot, a piece of apparel that is cross functional. You can dress it up, down. A lot of our product on Outway's site has fun designs on it because socks are very, they're a way people can kind of signal their individuality. They can express themselves. You and I know that from cycling. Socks, it's called like sock doping. It's a big part of the culture. And that's, where I fell in love with socks initially was just riding bikes and racing bikes. And, when I retired from that, I was like, I think I'll start a sock company. That seems like a fun challenge to take on. And it was a pretty stagnant space. There were some people doing cool things there, but, outside of the cycling sock industry was kind of underdeveloped in my opinion. So we first started there and really dove in.
Yeah, I'm super interested in this, and not to erode what the product is. Product's great. I'm really curious. So I am like surrounded by young entrepreneurs. One of my producers, Jeremy, a young man out of California, dying to have an apparel company. His goal is to design his own clothes, have a small boutique store, and service his customers and create a branded environment around that. And he's got an idea of what he wants, but what he really wants is a brand. And I feel that there's a couple of entryways into product, I'm really curious on how you got to where you did. You just mentioned that you saw a hole in cycling socks that needed to be filled with a better product. That's a thing, but you'd also needed to stumble across that with the idea of probably wanting to be an entrepreneur and own a company and build something. So I'm always trying to get like, I have no problems starting companies. In fact, if you talk to my business partners, I have a problem with starting companies because it's so easy to do for me. I've got patents, like you've got your trademark in behind you. I've got trademarks and patents and stuff hanging up all around me. And it's like, it's too easy, unfortunately. Once you know the key to be able to start a company, it's easy to do. It's difficult to execute on the companies as the logistics and all the other stuff. But starting it's not that hard of a thing once you figure out how to do it. What was the background that brought you to this? Were you like, okay, I'm assuming, what's your background? You have a sporting background. You just mentioned it. Where do you come from? Let's figure this out.
Yeah. I was a competitive cyclist for 10 years. I raced downhill mountain bikes. I was on the Canadian national team from 2008 till 2012, so 5 years in a row. So like my first, what I call my first act was as a pro athlete. Traveled the world racing my bike. It was a childhood dream that got realized, not to the ultimate goal of winning world champs and retiring and just being this retired athlete. That was kind of like, every young kid's dream. But really where starting a business came out of was, ending my cycling career and trying to figure out what do I do with the rest of my life. I set this really big goal when I was coming into my teen years and by most metrics accomplished it. And then I don't know about you, but when I was young, you think like your whole life is right there. And then you start to age a little bit. You're like, oh, the rest of my life is in front of me. I'm like 22 and I've finished my cycling career pretty much. And it's like, oh, I've got to like figure out what to do with the rest of my life, assuming I live an average lifespan. I've got like 50 to 60 years left. This is a long time. But my whole life up to that point was consumed with cycling, which when you retire seemingly kind of goes away overnight. And so it led into this sort of identity crisis of like, who am I? Like I was this competitive athlete just yesterday and now I'm retired and now I've got to kind of figure out who I am in this world and where do I go? And you're laughing in a way. You've probably gone through this as well. And
Rob, I'm going to shortcut you for 1 second. I literally finished my career racing pro downhill for GT, podiumed at nationals, retired. I was the generation just before you, and then went and invented VPP for Santa Cruz. That's where I'm from. And so like literally everything you're saying is verbatim exactly the thought patterns and issues I had. We couldn't be more alike in that exact component of our life. So I'm not laughing at you. I'm just laughing at the fact that that story is literally my story, which
No,
is
no, totally. Yeah. I knew a bit of that story and about your past. And that's why I knew you weren't laughing. That was a look of, I've lived this visceral feeling. And so you're right. That's what I was going through, and was like, what am I going to do? It's this identity crisis. It's this, one day you have this huge goal and this passion you wake up with for 10 years and then it's gone. Where do you apply that energy? And it's certainly not in a traditional life. The idea of getting a regular job or going to school was just terrifying. It seemed like not big enough, not a grand enough vision. So really starting a business was my way out of this identity crisis. And what am I going to do? And as we both know, socks are a part of cycling culture. I really wanted to stay immersed in sport. I just couldn't do that any longer as an athlete. So probably similar to you, as creating technology in the sporting industry, I created a brand and apparel in the sporting industry. Is like, I can stay involved in this way. I can go still sponsor athletes and be involved with them. I can still sponsor events and still go to the events. How do I still go to Crankworks every year? If I'm not going to be doing it racing, can I do it with a company? And so that was the simple idea, is like, okay, I want to start a business because I want a big goal to go after. I want it to be in the athletic space because that's where I love to live and thrive. Then I wanted to search for a product. I thought cycling socks could be improved, in socks in general. But as you talked about earlier, is like, the product was the idea, but I ultimately wanted to create a brand. I loved brands like Red Bull. I loved brands like Lululemon. I loved how they used athlete marketing and what they stood for. And so when I was forming the idea for my company, I was like, I'm going to start with socks. The idea at that point was to build more of an apparel company. But more importantly, I wanted to create a brand that stood for something a little more than just winning. I wanted to create a brand that stood for perseverance and resilience and basically showing up. How can we inspire a generation of people to just develop the courage and the inspiration and motivation just to show up and do their best and just try and improve every day? I felt at the time that a lot of athletic brands were kind of like, show up and win, and just, all there is winning. And it was really that dominant kind of culture at the time of like, if you're going to get involved in sport in general, it's like the goal is to win. Whereas I felt, especially as a retired athlete and an aging athlete, it's like, oh, the goal is just to kind of get out there and learn the skills and have a good time. And if winning's a byproduct of that, that's fantastic. And, there's levels to this, but I felt that the idea of just going out to try and win was somewhat destructive and somewhat restricting for a lot of people to get into it. So that was the idea of creating a brand that created more community around the idea of, how do you go out there and just try and not necessarily win, but achieve your personal best. That's the only goal. You're in a battle with yourself. So that was kind of how we got started.
so that's your goal for the consumer, but can I assume that you took all your competitive juices and took it into a company to win? Like I can only imagine like it's like I know it's a kind of a wacky thing to say, but yeah, you're trying to create a super inclusive, not just participate, but like performance and all this style stuff. But you're also in the background, like doing this to win everything I do, and I have to struggle with my wife in any communication thing not to try to win. I have to do it with my business partners. I have to do it with my clients. I have to do it in every aspect of my life because it is like, there's two things. I was born and raised on a clock. So to me, time is like, I would work for 6 months to shave 4 seconds, 6 seconds. I would hike a thing 1,000 times for 2 seconds. You did the exact same thing. And so I'm born and raised on a clock from all aspects of my athletic works. And then to me, like, not to be in a gross asshole, second wasn't a very good result. Like, it was fine. Third was okay. Fourth was completely unacceptable in every situation. And anything past that, I may as well have not even shown up because I was so not happy with myself. I'm assuming that, like, you don't get to that level, like any level of professional, national level sport in any country almost nowadays, without having that, like, the eye of the tiger that drives you to a point that makes you better than everybody. I'm assuming you went into business with that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and still to this day, I think like that was the main thing, was finding a new identity and finding a new big goal, like somewhere to point the competitive spirit. Like how am I going to go in? What I had to learn over time was just redefining what winning in business looks like, because it is somewhat of an infinite game. You know, in sport, we have defined rules and we've got competitors, and there is a clear winner. In business, I don't think it's zero sum. I think there isn't necessarily just winners and losers. I think there is somewhat of a rising tide effect that that we can all have to kind of help each other. There certainly is competing brands. I look at other brands and I want to do better. But how I've thought about winning in my current form is really, how do we just continue to do better every year? How do I ensure that I'm improving every year, not leaving any stone unturned, and that the business is continuing to push forward? So certainly the competitive spirit is there. It's different. I've had to apply it differently in business than sport, for just simply those reasons. Is there's a lot more longevity in business. You know, I want to be in this game for as long as possible, basically till I die. I think I'll be doing some form of business, kind of like what you said. It's now that you know the tools, it's hard not to do a million things at once. I've had to actually really scale back the amount of things I want to start or endeavors I want to go on, because that competitive spirit, again, is like, you just, once you're in this game, you see a million things that could be improved every day. Everything turns into a business opportunity. So staying focused has been kind of like a core goal for this year as well. But no, you're right. I mean, I'm still ultra competitive. Sometimes it really pains me, because you and I know in downhill, as an individual sport, everything lives and died by your effort. Whereas in business, especially the business I'm building, and in most, it's certainly a team effort, and my actions can have implications on others as well. And there's been times, you mentioned the rebrand earlier, we had to go through a rebrand. Every bone in my body wanted to fight, because we had to rebrand due to some legal threat from a competitor. And, you know, there were options, we had rights, and there were options where we could fight and potentially keep our name. However, the downside was much greater, and just the brain drain and time and resources it would take to fight that fight. And every bone in my body as a competitive athlete and someone that lived and died by my own effort wanted to fight, because like, I don't take a knee. We don't take knees in sports. Like, you go for it and you push through. That was one of the first times in my life where I had to kind of take a knee for the greater good of everything. It was no longer just about me. And so I have had to evolve my thinking on what it means to win and what it means to be competitive, and when that's serving me and hindering me. But certainly why I do what I do is still tied to this vision and goal of just wanting to be successful and wanting to just challenge myself and improve every day. It's, you know, it's for example, and it's still in all parts of my life. You know, I'm a father now. I want to be a better father. How do I get better at that? I still try to get competitive. I ran a half marathon this weekend and got super close to my personal best. And so I'm still out there trying to push my body and improve there too. And so even outside of business, I'm still finding ways to kind of take that competitive spirit and really push it to the next level. But I've had to, depending on where I am applying it, figure out when it needs to be serving me or might be hindering me.
Regulator's Market Check feature not only manages all your marketplace photos through a clear, easy-to-use interface, but also integrates dynamic and field surveys. This allows you to capture real-time market insights directly from the field, enhancing your strategic decisions and ensuring your marketing efforts are both effective and responsive to real-world conditions. Give us 15 minutes to show you how we will save you time and money. Go to brandregulator.com.
Yeah, it's actually, I'm really curious about that, because I turned 50 a few years back, so I'm a little bit older than you. And when I went through it, I was a ruthless athlete. Like, I was not a really nice person on the bikes. And I was, when I look back at it, I'm not super proud of myself and how I acted in a bunch of situations, because my ego ran unchecked. And when I look back at it from the point of being older and understanding business, I didn't necessarily have to be as ruthless in all the aspects. I could do these things. And I spent a bit of time analyzing ego and all these different things, which I feel I've got a few really high end athlete friends, and I feel they've all gone through this similar process because I've discussed this with them, where they're like, you have to go back and strip out. When you're young, you're hitting everything with ego like a giant sledgehammer, when in reality you need a fine little point, and you're just tapping that component of your ego for performance, and everything else around it drove me to alienate family and friends. It drove me to overdriving my own body fitness wise, because I was a national track cyclist, a road cyclist, and a mountain biker. So I kind of did all the different things. Led me in downhill mountain biking, most certainly led me to more crashes than my body could handle. Like, and you know that for a fact. Every crash that I ever did, minus a couple equipment failures, which were few and far between, were all based on ego. They were all ego driven. I can do this, and I know I can just let this fly, and brakes off. And those type of decisions led me to really, really poor life decisions for my body. And now I'm paying for it. I know you've hit the ground a million times. You obviously have. There's zero doubts. I'm really curious because I see my younger friends trying to start off in business. And I don't know if it was the generation I came out of. I am literally like directly out of the 80s. I grew up through the 70s and 80s, and like I was a wild child roaming the streets on bikes. I was just, I could do anything. And my ego built really, really fast and really blunt, and it was a nightmare. In some ways it really helped me, some ways it didn't. I'm really curious because I see less, I don't know how to define it, out of my younger friends, either less ego or less will to work, or less just get out there and do it. There's something that's missing. I'm really curious what you think that is in you that drives you. Like, there's something that drives, like, no one wants, like, truthfully, owning businesses is a terrible plan. It's a terrible plan. Like,
it's a lot of pain.
It's a lot of pain. They fail. Half the time you're screaming into the wind, into a dark forest of trees. No one hears you, and your world is very difficult, and it's all on you. And it looks amazing. I told this to someone the other day. No one is jealous about how you got to where you are in owning and brands and doing that. They're just jealous that you own a brand. They're not jealous about the sleepless nights and worried about having children because you run your own business, or trying like own your own business, try to get a mortgage. It's a nightmare. Like, that's just, no one knows that, but that's the reality of it. It's a nightmare. What do you think, like, what is the difference between you, and I'm really curious, between you and the person who wants to build a brand but doesn't build a brand? What is that?
Yeah, I've thought quite a lot about this. I agree. I think that generally speaking, it seems like there's a lack of ambition amongst the general population compared to what you might have seen in the past. But who knows? It's hard to say. I think like that's probably the byproduct of participation medals and people not really being not failing enough. So what I've actually dug into this a lot. So earlier this year, I went through a process with a coach / kind of psychologist to figure out what does drive me. So I do kind of understand this quite deeply now. Ego certainly plays a big part. And to touch on that point that you said earlier, I'm not sure anyone can get anywhere great in sport or business without a high degree of ego, like you said. And I don't know if there is any way to actually not go through those early stages without the sledgehammer. I think like the only way to ever reflect and get to the point where you are now, and I deeply understand now where you want to kind of be a little more precise with it, is to go through it and realize you were an asshole. I think when I was competing, if you were to ask anyone who knew me at the time, they would call me an asshole too, right? You're really self-centered. You're super hyper-focused, which presents as really intense and a bit of a dick. Not always. That was definitely me, and it sounds probably similar to you. So I was super intense, super focused, didn't really care what other people were up to or what they were doing or what they thought. I was really focused on the goal. And that serves you, but it can hinder you because, like there's, it's just one of these things. But I think in hindsight, I've realized that, I wish I just relaxed a little bit more, smelt the roses, enjoyed the time, it was fleeting. So I think in hindsight, if only we knew what we knew now, what we know now. I mean, I'm not sure if there's a way to get away from that. I think like any person doing great things to say they're not driven by ego or a bit of a narcissist is probably lying to themselves and you. So I think I've come to realize that I'm driven by those things. But what separates me from other people, look, I don't really know other people, but me, where this comes from is when I was a child, I wasn't very good at anything. I grew up in a family where traditional sports were kind of the things that me and my brother did. So baseball or hockey or basketball, traditional team sports. And hockey was the big one. And my brother was very good at it, and I wasn't very good at it. And so I learned as a young kid that, being good at hockey equals being accepted, and that's where this feeling of accomplishment comes from. And I see my brother doing really well at it, and I can't do it. And I wasn't very good at the other team sports. I was a bit of an overweight child. I was just like the most frustrating thing for me was I was not bad. I just wasn't good enough. So like when I would try out for all the school teams, I always tried. I never quit, and I always tried. I was always willing to fail. So I had that going for me. I had a good attitude. But I would try out for all the teams, and I would always be like the first person not to make it, because I would know that because they would always have like a reserve or a call up. And so they say, hey, Rob, like you're on the cusp. Like if we ever have someone drop out, you're next in line. So I was like always on the cusp. So it built into me this like intense drive that when I find my thing, I'm going to go fucking all in on it. Like I was just like, I just built this kind of, I think it was this desire to want to do something great. So this early childhood development of like attaching being good at something to being accepted. So that was what I learned as a way to find love and acceptance in the world from people that I cared about, paired with this mindset that I think was fairly inherent, which was maybe just a part of who I am, of not giving up and being willing to try. So those two things combined, when I found something that I excelled at, like cycling, I was just like, I'm gonna go all the way with this. Like there's just, you know what it takes to be a downhill mountain biker, but I grew up in Pickering, Ontario, in flat Canada. There was no mountains, and I still made it work. So I was like, I can do this. I will figure it out. And, got named to the national team, and, like Val di Sole, Italy was my first world champs. And I just think it was those lessons I learned as a child and this desire to want to, prove that I could do something, prove to everyone. I had like the world's largest chip on my shoulder. And so I think maybe what's happened is that I'm not sure if kids are given enough opportunity to fail. Like when I was growing up, like you just didn't make the team. You didn't get a participation medal. It was like, sorry, buddy, like figure it out. Better luck next time. And so perhaps all the participation medals and trying to protect people's feelings all of the time now provide a soft landing for everything in life. Like basically I've heard you cannot like fail classes anymore. Like they just push you through the system. I think this is like short-term good. It really, it softens the blow for people in the moment, but long-term bad because they're not building resilience. They're not building this understanding that like, you actually have to work hard for results. They're not just going to be given to you. And what sport taught me and those formative times taught me is that everything is earned, not owed. I just don't have this mentality, even to this day, with some, maybe outside level of success. People are like, like you said, they see I own a business or whatever. It's like, I wake up every day still trying to get it and go after it. Like, I don't feel like I've arrived. I don't take what I've got for granted. I feel like I have to pay my dues every day because I know I've worked for this, like I earned it. No one gave me this, no one. And I think sport is the ultimate breeding ground for that, especially competitive sport. I think recreational's lost the plot a little bit with like the participation medals and not being able to fail. But in competitive sport, there's still winners and losers, and you can't just show up to the start line for a downhill race and win. You have to put in the work, and then you have to execute when it matters. So that teaches you a level of like, I can't just show up. I've got to put in the work, and I've brought that over to business, and that's been helpful for me and successful. And I think taking that same attitude to life, where like, look, every day you're not owed anything. You got to get out there and earn your place in this world. And that requires a ton of work. That requires constant learning, being open-minded. The amount of things I've had to like I said, I went through this self-discovery thing early this year with the coach and psychologist to really take myself apart and understand, why am I the way I am? Because like I was going through this, I reached a certain level in cycling, certainly not where I wanted to get to. And I'm kind of terrified that I'll not reach the next level in business. So I'm trying to search for ways to constantly improve and build on myself. And I think that really starts with developing a better understanding of yourself. Like if I'm going to build on top of this career, like I got to make sure the foundation's solid and that I even understand what the foundation is, And so going through that process really helped to understand what drives me, where are those parts of what is driving me also going to hinder me, and how do I move through this world and try ultimately be a lot happier too. Like I think maybe the same is true of you from what I'm gathering is that like I didn't enjoy much of the sport time, right? Because like you're so intense. There's parts to enjoy. It's nice winning, but like if I think back about being in Italy, I didn't enjoy being in Italy. I didn't actually.
Italy didn't matter. Yeah.
No, it didn't matter. It could have been anywhere, but like if I look back, it's like, man, that was such a special time. Like I wish I just like took a day and just appreciated where I was. So like, how do I still remain hyper ambitious and focused, but actually enjoy the process while I'm going through it, not in hindsight?
Transform your trade marketing with Regulator, where trade marketing precision meets sales tool performance. Regulator ensures every marketing dollar is spent wisely, keeps your team aligned with defined user governance. Whether you're managing local campaigns or global initiatives, Regulator keeps your marketing efforts streamlined and effective in the real world. Give us 15 minutes to show you how we will save you time and money. Go to brandregulator.com.
Athletics breeds a different style of human because there is actually winners and losers, specifically non-team sports. Team sports can do it to a certain level, but it's really easy to pass the buck. Not so easy to pass the buck when it's all on you. It's all on you. And so I feel in hockey, goalies take it way more personal than a lot of the other players out there. And because they're literally the last man standing to stop that puck. I feel that there's a different mentality there a little bit. Is there a way for a younger person coming into wanting to start a brand to cultivate that? Like I don't, other than doing hard things and teaching yourself that, like continuously upgrading what hard is. And I tell this to people all the time, and I chuckle because the earned not owed. I took out my family for a mountain bike ride, all my family mountain bikes now, my niece and my nephew's new wife, Faith, and they're e-biking. I made them turn the power off and do a climb, and we're going up and I'm grading them on this climb, my niece and Faith. And I gave them a grade, and then afterwards I thought about it and I'm like, oh, I missed this and this. And I texted them. I'm like, hey guys, Danica, you didn't get a D plus, you get a D minus. You blew the top switch back and you made Faith fall off her bike. Faith, you didn't have a perfect ride. You're going down from an A plus to an A. Sorry, team, hard knock life. And they both were like, what do you mean? I'm like, there's no freebies, guys. Just because I forgot it. And they like, there's no freebies. Come on, you can be better than that. They're like, well, it wasn't my fault Danica fell. I go, guys, I was behind both of you. And I'm a better rider. I saw it coming. I rode around both of you and beat you to the top. That shouldn't happen. But there's no, they're not owed that. They have to earn that. And even on something funny like a family mountain bike ride, I feel that there's actually still space for that to help people cultivate that hardness.
I think, well, for starters, I think they're lucky they've got someone like you in their corner doing that and challenging them, because I'm not sure that you can teach this, or teach yourself how to be resilient or or persevere, like without doing the hard things. I've thought a lot about this. If there's any other way, I would say, like, for someone looking to start a business, I think they should really ask themselves and meditate on, why do I want to start a business? Because if the answer to that question is, oh, I want to have, I want to own my time, or I want to make more money or something like that, I was like, those are bullshit answers and you shouldn't start a business. Because that's the wrong reason to start a business. I think the people that ultimately start a business for the right reasons is they've got this, desire to improve something. They see a big problem and they want to solve it, and they just like literally can't move through the world without solving that problem. Or someone more like me that was like, I need a big goal, and I know where I want to point myself. I just need to figure out how to get there. And that manifested in starting a business in the athletic space. And it was never this desire to make money or own my time. Like, I was actually searching for a way to fill my time. I wanted to work hard on something. I wanted to get back into that zone where, like, there's hard work, like there's a bit of pain and there's a bit of reward if it works out. But it was never for these kind of like external things, like being able to say I own a business or like try to look cool. I think like that's probably where I would start with someone, is actually ask them, like, why do you want to do this? Because if the answer is correct, and I would have them answer it, and I would tell them honestly, I'd be like, I think you're doing it for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. And I think that would probably be a good starting place, because I think if they're doing it for the right reasons, they probably have a level of resilience or perseverance already built into them, because they got to that point where like they have this desire in them to do it for the right reasons. So I'm not sure beyond that if there is a way that you could teach it other than doing it. I mean, if someone has the right reasons but they haven't necessarily gone through hardship, the business is going to teach them those lessons. Maybe they won't succeed, but they're going to learn. There's just no way around it. If you start a business, you're just going to eat shit for a while. So I think that's probably the, like, I would boil it down to intentions. Why are you doing it?
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel that there's a matrix of things that a person needs to be able to build a successful small business to medium business to large business, because no one just starts and it's a fucking wild hit. I'm really good friends with the Cormacs, who own Herschel. And I grew up with them, and that's the only time, and trust me, I know, because I was in the same office as those guys when they were building Herschel. We shared an office, and I watched them do it. I watched James and Lyndon and their brother Jason build this company, and they had to go through all these steps. They found a commercial success really, really rapidly. It happened literally in 6 to 8 months. It was really fast, faster than I've ever seen anything happen. But they still had to go through all those steps. And they are like, those guys are resilient as hell, all of them. And they have all of those, all of the stuff we're talking about. They have all of it. They just happened to also strike on a very, very good commercial concept that really ran really well. So if there's multiple pillars, so their trajectory. So if you have a successful person who's got hard work ethic, understands hard things, to me, the next really important thing is the authentic trajectory to solving whatever their problem and solution they want to do. I found, and I'm always interested in talking, because this was something that plagued me and still does plague me, is magic thinking. So it's really easy to talk yourself into, oh, this is going to be a commercial success. It's going to happen like X, Y, and Z. It's going to go viral, and this is going to be unbelievable. And 6 months later, you're sitting there with inventory and you're rubbing your forehead and you're like, fuck, Santa Claus doesn't exist. And you sort of take a deep breath and you're like, I did it to myself again. And all that magic thinking that it was going to work is all direct product of seeing fast commercial successes that get thrown in our face on social media, arguably through my friends, the Cormacs, which is one of my only real life fast commercial successes that I saw. But in reality, almost every company is an overnight 10-year success, right? Where it looks like it came out of nowhere, but the dudes or dudette has been grinding for years honing this thing. How much did you or do you have to fight your internal? I feel this is part of the problem with young entrepreneurs building a business is the magic thinking
Mhm.
component of it. They don't think about logistics. They just don't know magically somehow that's going to get solved. Try to build a fixture or ship a bunch of socks or whatever around the globe. Well, hold on a second. There is a world of actual problems. All the magic thinking that's just going to happen doesn't happen. How much of that did you have to discover when you transitioned careers? How much of it did you actually know? Like to me, I was filled with magic thinking. I still am. Like
Mhm.
half the stuff, like my downfall now is I think I can do everything 3 or 4 times faster than I actually can. That
Yeah.
if you were to ask me what
Yeah.
my problem is, that's my problem. But that's also part of my magic because I wouldn't start anything if I actually knew how hard and how long it would take me. I would never start it.
Mhm.
There's something inside me that tricks myself to think I can do it way, way, way faster. And then I start digging in and then I'm halfway through and I'm like, oh my God. Well, I got to finish it now because the hard part, the part of me that wants to climb that mountain takes over. How much of that have you battled?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna sound like a bit of a broken record, but I think like ego, like everything we've talked about, it's like these things really help you get started. And then as things progress and mature, they start to hinder you. I mean, let's think about it. To start a business or an athletic career, you need a ton of magical thinking, you need a ton of ego, you need a ton of competitive nature, you need all of those things, all of the negatives that eventually will come and bite you because if you think about scaling a business and growing a business, you start to need to be patient. You need some of the opposite of some of the things that got you started, and I think it's part of the natural founder arc. And the ones that can recognize that and evolve are successful over time, and the ones that aren't flame out and maybe start something new and just continually go through that cycle. I think I started the business and pretty quick it was like successful. The first year I had no business experience. I had started it with $1,000. I bought my first little haul of socks. I bought 230 pairs of socks, took them to school. I was going to college at the time, trying to figure out what to do with my life, for sport management, so not even in a business program, and just sold them hand to hand to people. And that full year we did over $300,000 in sales. So it was like this pretty like that was insane to me. Like I was just like, if you told me that when I was starting that we would do 300 grand that year, I'd say you're fucking crazy. I'd never seen money like that. That would be insane. So, and then for the 5 years after, we were growing over doubling the business every year. Year 4 to 5, we grew 136%. I was like, so in like fifth year, I was sitting there like, I'm a genius, like, of course, like the magical thinking is kind of working. It's just building, it's compounding. I'm like, I didn't know what I was doing, but look at me now, we're building a sock empire. And that very quickly turned, like year 6, 7, things started to get hard. You get to a certain size in business and then the fundamentals will catch up to you. It's like building out supply chains, building out teams, building out infrastructure, actually maturing the business. And that was really a point where a lot of the things that were help drive me, like that competitive spirit, really quick thinking, thinking a little bit short term, but being very quick to action, that started to really hurt. Quick pivots hurt when you've got big teams and supply chains. And like it just throws a wrench in everything. So I had to go through basically a 2-year discovery process of like, how do we actually reconfigure myself and the business to scale? What's that even mean for building out teams, building out processes, infrastructure? You still need that magical thinking, but I had to extend the time horizon. I had to be like, rather than how do we just grow double every year, the focus really was like, how do we make sure we have a business that's still here in 20 years? And what does that look like? It was almost changing the goal. The goal was no longer ego driven, where it's like, we need to hit this arbitrary revenue goal because I say we should. It's like, we're not a public company. I'm not reporting our earnings to try and get our stock price up. We were bootstrapped at the time. We did raise some money, but my investor group are close friends and also entrepreneurs. So they're not expecting me to double the business. They are invested for the long term. So here I was just setting these like arbitrary goals that my ego said would be cool, and then not hitting them and just beating myself up over it. I was like, why are we doing this? Let's shift the narrative here. what would it look like to build Outway that's still here in 20 years from now? Like, what are the decisions we need to make today to make that a reality? Then it becomes quite clear. It's like, if that's the goal, and the goal is obviously still to grow every year and hit some big goals and set stretch goals. It doesn't mean don't have goals. It means make them in line with a long-term mindset. Don't do short-term things that are going to hurt you in the long term. And that was really the change we made last year that is leading to huge success this year. We're back on a really strong growth trajectory. Revenues, going good, profits really great, and everyone's having a lot more fun too, because we're really aligned on the vision and where we're headed, and it's not so chaotic. When you're kind of like fueling the business with ego and arbitrary goals just for the sake of trying to hit numbers, it feels a lot more hollow than actually trying to fulfill your customer obligation, make a better product, increase distribution, build out great systems, build great teams. And those things take time. So you need to give yourself the kind of patience and just, I don't know, like almost just yourself that level of forgiveness to be like, hey, we can just take a step back and make sure we build this thing thoughtfully and methodically over the next 20 years and be like, it's okay not to always hit it out of the park every day. Like base hits. We don't need to hit home runs every time we step up to the plate. Base hits over 20 years is going to make an incredible business. And how many home runs can you hit? Like, you're going to strike out a lot, and that generally is going to take the business out, right? So there's a fine balance there for sure, but that was definitely the shift I had to make from magical thinking of like, I still have magical thinking. I still truly think we can build $1 billion sock business. It's a $50 billion market. So, I mean, $1 billion is not even a huge market share of 50. But that's a big ass goal. That's super magical thinking to think I could do it. I mean, but it's the same thinking that got me from $1,000 to over 10 million. So it's like, it's not completely out of reality. So, but it's a timeline thing, I think.
Magical thinking is amazing. I love it. VPP wouldn't exist without magical thinking. I was just a guy who liked bikes, and I knew how bikes should work. And I was like, I know I can make a better bike. And so I went and found a friend, and we made a better bike. And it's 30 years later, it's still basically the gold standard. We started Outland. No one expected VPP to continue as this thing. Santa Cruz just released a new e-bike without VPP, and they're getting roasted because it is so fundamentally part of their brand 30 years later that it's like, and it's funny because I'm going through social media and I look at it and I feel very proud that there is just hundreds and hundreds of comments of like, no VPP, no Santa Cruz. And it's like, that's literally my DNA in that. It's not the same thing anymore. They've iterated on it, made it way better, but that's where it came from. And I feel that that's a really interesting thing. I have one more kind of question. I know we're sort of short on time. I had the young man, Jeremy, that I was talking about that wants to start a brand. He came and actually did an entrepreneurship internship with me where he literally lived at my ranch, did all the ranch work with me, was digging in the ground, running tractors, getting, up at 6, well, it's 5 in the summer, up at 5, workout, actual ranch work, get to the office by 9, work all day, go home, either ride bikes, play tennis, and then do more work. And his head exploded with the volume. He's like, I cannot believe what you do. And my wife owns a law firm and she works harder than me. And it's just, that's our environment. It's what we do. And we live a beautiful life, but it's like, it is very earned.
It's earned. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really curious. I have my own ideas on like work and life and the unbalance that it creates, and there is no balance in my opinion. What are your thoughts on, because everybody wants to own a business, have a dope car, super hot girl or guy, whatever it may be, live in an awesome mansion, travel the world, and do Instagram shit. Like, that's literally, if you could boil it down, that's pretty much what everybody wants in one form or another. The balance of actual work and life is very challenging,
Mm-hmm.
if not impossible. To like they mingle and in my world, they're all encompassing all around. What's in your sauce? Like what do you do?
Anyone who says that you can start a business and have work-life balance is fucking lying to you, or they're not in business. I mean, it's as simple as that. However, so for a young entrepreneur starting out, just forget it. Like, there's going to be no balance. I mean, if you think about it this way, what does balance imply? It involves equilibrium, right? So it means equal parts hard work and equal parts resting. Well, if the goal of business is to tilt the odds in your favor, you want to be out of balance, right? You want to be like all in on creating success. However, again, I think that needs to shift over time because I think the goal of starting a business is to eventually award yourself more balance, right? And like that can look differently. I think you always want to work hard, but one of the goals of actually starting a successful venture is that you can hire people, you can delegate, you can invest in things to offset some of the things you don't want to do and award yourself a little more balance. Although I wouldn't call it balance because, I mean, if you're going to start a business, you're probably have a part of your DNA that's a little flawed or altered that's going to keep you hyper ambitious for everything you do. However, I would say that you can actually offset a lot of the stuff you don't want to do so you can go even harder, maybe even less balanced in the things you want to do. I think where this conversation gets a little muddy is when I say to young entrepreneurs, is like, there's going to be no balance. They go, oh, well, like, what about my health and stuff? It's like, no, well, working out and keeping a sharp mind and keeping important relationships in your life is part of the work. That's part of the work. I mean, you're not going to be the most effective. If you think about athletics again, part of the work is recovering. It's not just going out and training. Part of the work is recovering. Part of the work is having a stable life at home. That's building a relationship. That's having good, close friends. That's mentally very good for you. So that's all part of the work. What it doesn't mean is you don't necessarily go party. It doesn't mean that you eat junk food all the time. That's not part of the work because it's not helping you. In order to be a high functioning entrepreneur or athlete, you need to have a holistic approach to your life where everything in your life is basically trying to point you in being the best version of yourself. And that's not going to be just working hard. That's going to be everything that allows you to work hard. Like, because if you're going to be able to put in long days, day after day for 5 years to basically get something off the ground, which is basically what it's going to take. It's going to take about 5 years for it to be something that might work, and it's going to take all of your fucking time for those 5 years. You might have balance in the 5 to 10 portion where you can start to hire enough people and there's maybe enough stability where you're kind of like from startup to scale up a little bit. If timelines, we're talking more on averages here. Some people, like you said, have quicker success and some take longer. My experience was there's about 5 years of beating my head against the wall till then there was something I had a bit of an ember to blow on and start to build the fire. But I mean, what is important in that time is that you're taking care of yourself and there is enough allocation to your mental and physical health that gives you the engine to put in that time. If you're not recovering, if you're not sleeping well, you're not taking care of your body, you don't have fulfilling relationships in your life, you're going to crumble under the pressure. Those things are critical to success. So I think that's often the piece that's missed in work-life balance is people think, oh, if I'm working, I can't go to the gym or whatever. It's like, no, that's part of the work. Some of my best ideas are on a run or a bike ride, right? So I actually carve that into the work. It's like, I actively think if I'm going for a run, I'm either going to listen to this book or podcast, or I'm going to try and have an idea or put myself in a creative space where an idea welcomes. I think you can't really force good ideas, but that's how I think about it. And so like, I hate this kind of, I think it comes along with like participation medal generation and just this weak messaging and culture where people are like, work-life balance is what you should strive for. It's like, is it though? Is that where fulfilling life is going to come from? Like maybe for some people, like, look, if you're a salaried worker and you put in your time for a paycheck and what you want is balance and you're honest about that, awesome. Power to you. I'm happy for you. If you're telling me you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to be in the 1% of the 1% with an outlier success and you want balance, good luck. Like you're going to get crushed by everyone that doesn't want balance. And so I think that's the mixed messaging is that we need to be like, too many people have magical thinking in the wrong way where they think that they're the outlier that can have everything. They can have their cake and eat it too. Right. Like, and it's just not the reality. And I think to your point earlier, we are fed all of these 10-year overnight success stories, and you see the tip of the iceberg and nothing else. We see when people are on the podium. We don't see the early mornings, the crashes, the injuries. We see the 10, 20, $100 million business successes. You don't see the stress, the sleepless nights, the health deterioration. You don't see all of that, but that's the reality. That's basically all there is 99% of that. And 1% of the time you're like celebrating. And that really messes with people. So yeah, I think balance is a myth. I think it's not something you should strive for. But I mean, if you're successful with your business, I think it's a totally reasonable thing to build into your life if that's what you want. I would say I've built in a lot more balance into my life. I'm 8 years into my business. I've got a large team. I've got an assistant. I've got help at home because that's what I've invested in to buy back time, to allocate that to what I want to do. Right. So I try to do as little of the things that I don't want to do so I can spend more time doing things I want to. It doesn't mean I'm partying or going on vacations all the time. It means that I can play golf in an afternoon if I want to, or I can go hang out with my kid and not think about work. That's what's important to me now. But that is the phase of life I'm in, while still allocating a significant portion of my time to work. But that's been the result of like 7 years basically of just like all in redlining. And so I think the work-life balance thing is something you work towards, not start with, for sure.
It's a reward. First, shout out Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time, one of the greatest books that any entrepreneur can read.
I've got it up on the shelf here.
I've got assistants, and I've got people who help me at my ranch. I've got all sorts of people because of Dan and my wife, and they both collectively talked me into that. Dan's a really smart guy. You should look him up. So I want to see how close we are in this. It's easy because there's only 7 answers. I know what my favorite night of the week is. Where the night of the week where I am like excited to go to bed and like psyched, and I know, and I am always, it's without fail.
It's probably Sunday night.
Is that yours?
Yeah, same. Yeah, for sure.
It's
100%.
mine.
Yeah, I love it. My least favorite day of the week, or least favorite time, is holidays, because the whole world shuts down, logistics shut down, people are off work. It's like, and it makes you kind of like the world's most hated person, because I hate weekends and holidays because we're not working. And people are like, you are a dickhead. I'm like, well, no, I love what I do so much. I don't want there to be pauses in it, So no, I knew your answer as soon as you said it. Sunday night, because it's like, good, it's Sunday a fresh week. We get to get back at it. Like, everyone's online. Let's get going. So
I'm so excited for my team meeting at 10 a.m. with my companies, where it's like, it is like, there is no night. It used to be my worst. I was a terrible student. I wanted nothing to do with Monday morning. Once I figured, like, it is my night. I am like invigorated, and I am psyched, and I am refreshed, and it's game changing. And I feel actually that's almost one of the greatest talisman for someone who wants to run a business. If you're not excited for Monday morning, 6 a.m., you will not make it. Like, if your passion, what you want to create a business around, doesn't make it so that you are driven to be up at 6 a.m. Monday morning and excited about it, it won't go. The thing won't go. It's like fundamentally one of the tiny little things that's like a marker for me.
Totally.
I want to leave you with one more thought before we dog too much on the young generation. I've got a theory in my head that I haven't heard many people talk about. However, I believe that the younger generation right now is most likely, all science points to the fact they're going to live to 120, 130 years old. It's fairly, arguably, pretty fair statement. I'm going to live hopefully well into my 90s and be quite functional. But I believe the younger generation, as science improves, is going to do that. Now, my question is if I look at most 21-year-olds, they are where I was when I was 14. As far as drive, as far as how capable I was. Like, I feel that they're just kind of coming out of their adolescence in this early age. Do you believe that this is possibly somehow, it might be luck, it might be whatever, but in the time span that they have to develop now, do you believe they're exactly potentially right where they should be, and they can still learn to do hard things?
That's interesting. I've never thought about like you're just speaking relative to our timeline versus theirs. They're at 20. Yeah, maybe. I mean, a counterpoint could be like if they've got more time, that it would be advantageous to start earlier as well because they can make a bigger impact. So I don't know. Maybe. I've evolved so much on this. Is like I don't know. I think these things have natural progressions to them, and I don't really fault anyone. The only time I ever like, if a 21-year-old hasn't really figured out what to do with their life, but they're having fun, like, look, you're only young once. The only time I ever have problems with a lack of ambition is when people say they want to do hard things and their actions don't align to it. That's the only time I have a problem. I don't actually look at anyone and be like, you should be trying harder, because maybe their goal is not to try harder. Like, and if they're happy and living their own life, I'm like, hey, power to you. Like, I've learned just not like, if people's actions align with what they want out of life and they're happy and they're not hurting anyone, hey, power to them. Only when there's that misalignment am I like, so when I see a 21-year-old, regardless of how long they're going to live, if they say they want to start a business, or they are doing a business and they're not where they should be, or their actions are aligning, then I've got a problem. I'm just like, look,
I feel the participations, and we've made them children longer, the way parenting has worked. Truthfully, I feel that I still hold great hope for these generations. I actually do. Like, in my head, I see them being just like stunted, but in reality, they're going to be right in the center of their career at 50 or 60, right? Like literally, because they just can't afford to go to 130 if they're not still working. Plus, they should be hyper functional with the way science and medicine and everything is evolving. So to me, it's something that I've been dwelling on and just trying to get my head wrapped around it. Makes me want to hire more 30-year-olds, because I feel they're going to have the energy of a solid 20-year-old from 25, 30 years ago. They'll be like right in the pocket of it. So maybe it's us having to adjust what the parameters of their lifespan and how they were raised are. But it doesn't mean they're not going to do hard things. I didn't start doing hard things until I was 14, 15. And I started doing really, really hard things. If everything is slid on a bigger scale, maybe they're still in the pocket. Still might be great hope for them.
And I'll say I do a lot of speaking at the local university here, and I've seen quite a few cohorts over the last 8 years, business students come through, and I've seen some smart cats in there, man, like, and some ambitious ones too. So like, I used to be kind of like knocking on them as well. It's easy to knock on the generation. I think that's just every generation has knocked on the one coming up. So I think you raise a really interesting point. I'm going to think on that, and maybe we'll have to, I know we're coming up on time. We'll have to, I think this could have gone much longer. So we'll probably have to book a round 2 here, especially if people. Let's do a second one. Let me think on that one, because I want to dig deeper in, because I've never pondered it. I've actually never heard anyone articulate it like that to me. But I think it's wise. I think there's something there. So let me loop back with you on that.
Careful not calling me wise, because that just blows my ego up. Rob, you're a gem. Pleasure to get to know you. Let's go on a bike ride. I'm assuming you still ride bikes. Let's go for a bike ride.
Of course, I'd love to.
I'll make a point of doing that. If you're ever in Calgary, look me up, and please come and visit. I would love to take you for dinner and get to know you a little better. Thank you for your advice. There's some amazing advice in there that I 100% align with, and I believe, and you articulate it really good. All the best of luck for the upcoming selling season up through holiday and launching new product into next year, which I'm sure you're doing. Let's chat in the near future, because I feel you've got some really good lessons for your entrepreneurs coming up and going through the processes that you've already learned, and you do a great job of explaining them. Thank you a bunch. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. This was super fun. Count me in for a round 2. We got a lot more to go on.
Round 2. Maybe we'll do it in person. Let's do a round 2 in person. That seems like
sure. Yeah, I'll come out to Calgary. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining in. This is a great episode, Rob. You're a pleasure. Everyone else, we'll see you on the next episode of Marketeers Clubhouse. Thanks, Rob.